Welcome to the San Mateo Arboretum Society's Zoom seminar. Today we are doing Creating Sacred Space in the Garden with Arete Nicholas. My name is Virginia and I'm one of the Education Committee members. This program will last approximately 90 minutes. It will be recorded, so you will be able to see it later, a few days after. There will be a question and answer session at the end, and please submit questions during the presentation by clicking on the chat box. Let me tell you a little bit about what's happening first at the Arboretum Society. Our nursery in San Mateo Central Park is open 11 to 2 on Saturdays and Sundays. The entrance is at the north gate. Payment is by credit or debit card or Apple Pay, but we do not accept cash. We have a wide array of indoor and outdoor plants. And also, while you're in the park, you can visit our fairy garden, our 2 demonstration gardens, one on sun plants, one on shade, our amazing rose garden, and the butterfly hummingbird garden. All of these gardens and the nursery are maintained by our Arboretum Society volunteers. As an Arboretum Society volunteer member, you can receive discounts to our workshops, 10% discount on our purchases at the Arboretum Nursery, and discounts at a few nurseries in the peninsula. We also have volunteer opportunities in the nursery, selling and potting plants, working on the education committee, organizing seminars, and working in the community outreach. You can explore all these opportunities by going to our website, sanmateoarboretum.org. Now I'm excited to present our presenter, Arete Nicholas. Arete is a registered nurse and master gardener who brings her passion for health and healing from the clinical setting to help create gardens and sacred spaces for meditation, prayer, and reflection. Arete has been certified as a master gardener for San Mateo and San Francisco counties since 2014. She also served as Beaker's Bureau Chair and Vice President of the organization from 2015 until 2017. In addition to her leadership role, Arete delivers gardening workshops for the San Francisco Public Library and Community Connections on topics such as California native plants, container gardening with flowers and herbs, pollinator plants, and the health and wellness benefits of gardening. Moreover, Arete manages an award-winning garden in San Francisco's Noe Valley neighborhood, serves on the Noe Valley Annual Garden Tour Planning Committee, and designed the plantings for a community gathering space in the neighborhood. Arete received her MA in gerontology and RN, BSN, and PHN from San Francisco State University. I'm pleased to turn this over to Arete Nicholas. Arete.
All right. Well, thank you, Virginia. I'm going to now share my screen to open my PowerPoint so we can get going, because I'm so excited to deliver today's presentation. So this is entitled Creating Sacred Space in the Garden. And I'd like to say at the very beginning of the presentation that there will be a short writing exercise in probably about 10 minutes. So for those of you who don't have pencil or paper or something to type on nearby, you might want to get prepared for that. And I also, to begin with, wanted to say that I developed this, the passion for developing this presentation really came from my years of being a gardener and seeing how much effort, time, and attention that we all put into our gardens. But what I realized sometimes was lacking was that we're giving and putting energy there, and we can get immediate gratification from seeing something grow or, you know, take off, like a vine take up a trellis, or your tomato plant that, you know, blooms its first sun gold tomato. But sometimes those feelings are short-lived, and it's almost like fast food. And so this desire to create this came from, how do we let our gardens nourish us in deeper ways? And how can we support that in our gardens? And by the way, your garden can be, it can be a balcony, it can be a small garden, it can be a deck, a small area for contemplation and reflection can be created almost anywhere. So, what is sacred space? It's, according to Joseph Campbell, it's a place where wonder can be revealed. It is also where you can find yourself, come home to yourself, regenerate yourself again and again. And what else might it be? A small oasis in the garden to visit when you need peace, calm, and strength. A place for prayer, meditation, or writing. Or a cozy, intimate place to be and not do. A sacred space can be many things to many people, and it's really where you are putting your own personal imprint on this space. So just a little bit of history of sacred garden spaces to set the tone before we talk about today and what's current. And how is this relevant to us today, this history? So original temple gardens were made in Mesopotamia, along the banks of the Euphrates River, near where Iran, or it was called Persia at the time, is today. And they were also found in ancient Egypt and Greece. A sacred garden, just for definitional purposes, can be, but is not necessarily, a religiously influenced garden. And the history of some of our oldest gardens really goes back over 10,000 years. And we're going to explore that in the next slide, where these murals and these vessels, I actually took these photos when I had the fortunate blessing to go to Crete 5 years ago. And there's a settlement in Santorini, Greece, that is a big archaeological dig where they uncovered evidence of gardens in the Minoan period, which was like 15,000 BC. So gardens have a very ancient history. So this was a garden water vessel. And they also uncovered frescoes that were done with minerals that had evidence of plants and flowers to indicate there were gardens. And so I found that quite fascinating. The site of the earliest known gardens are from this cradle of civilization. And initially, two separate worlds were created. The people saw outside their walls the outer world as being wild. And it was wild, and oftentimes intruders and warring tribes would be outside those walls. But they saw the inner as a sanctuary bounded by walls where plants, food, people, and animals were protected. So what is the relevance of this to us today? So the relevance is that for thousands of years, what history has shown is that people have sought a place where the divine or something larger than ourselves can be experienced. And what's a little different today is that concept, I think, still follows through when we live in an age with more stresses and input than we've ever had before digitally, all the different things that are coming at us from, and the demands from our different worlds of work, social, etc. But today we also acknowledge that eco concerns and incorporate these principles into our sacred spaces. For instance, natives, wildlife, pollinator, and drought-tolerant plantings. So this is a picture of my garden that you're seeing on the screen. And this happens to be a statue of Kuan Yin that I find personally reassuring. You can use any statue you want in the space that you create, or no statues at all. Again, we'll be getting into the specifics of this in a moment, but it's important to have something there that you have a connection with and that you can relate to, and that symbolizes something that is healing and nurturing and soothing for you. It can be as happy and as light as having art in your garden. Here's a space to sit, and there's a beautiful art plaque that is life is art, paint your dreams. It's all about creativity. And then we have labyrinths, which walking labyrinths can be found inside and outside. This is one that is outside. I know there's a very big labyrinth here in San Francisco at Land's End near the ocean that is constantly being redone because so many people walk it that they have to reconstruct it periodically. There's also a beautiful labyrinth here in San Francisco in Grace Cathedral. And I know many of you might be from the peninsula, and so there may be labyrinths. I'm sure there is labyrinths, or if there are a labyrinth, I would love to hear about them in your area. Altars also make us mindful, and there's been entire books written on how to create an altar that's personally significant for you, but they make us mindful of what we sometimes forget in the daily rush, and just allow us to breathe and center and be present. So there's many cultures, many gardens. This is in the Meteora area of Greece, a temple. There oftentimes with sacred garden spaces, gates and doors are used as entry points. And here I happen to capture these photos on the island of Naxos, Greece. And you can see the gate here with the garden behind it. So that's one way to feature an entry point. Another can be a trellis, an archway into your garden where you wish to reflect, meditate, journal, pray, whatever moves you. In Japan, now I asked different master gardeners to submit photos of sacred garden spaces that they related to, and this was taken by a fellow master gardener, Lisa Erdos, and she went to Japan, and oftentimes stone lanterns are used in gardens in Japan, but also here in the United States. You know, again, we're in a multicultural world. And stones and stone formation, and also the gravel formation around the stones all have symbolic meaning. And in Bali, where I went 4 years ago, the Balinese really create, this is not a special shrine or a special area. I flew into Denpasar there, which is the airport, and I was staying outside of that area with a group of travelers in the outskirts of the area in a residential neighborhood. And one morning I walked around early, just to see what I could see. And this was in a front garden in Bali, where you see the table laid, offerings made on the table. You have a wreath of flowers, and an altar here, or a place of, place for blessings has been created. And on the right-hand slide, this is called a gratitude offering. And many businesses, I saw this outside of business in a doorway, where at the beginning of the day, it was a merchant. They put their gratitude offering outside the door, and they believe that that will attract good, good energy, commerce, good business into their doors. And this is a daily practice. I found it actually quite beautiful and quite inspirational. So at this point, we are going to pause. So hopefully you have your writing tools ready. And we're going to do a 5-minute and garden gate meditation. And so at this point, it's a guided meditation, and you will close your eyes, and you can turn your camera off, or if your camera is on. And I'm going to lead you through this meditation. And the objective is to help you visualize a garden where you would like to be. And so let's get comfortable, get seated if you're not, in a comfortable chair, close your eyes and allow yourself to breathe. Begin with a few slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, letting your body get relaxed. Let the chair fully support your body as you continue to breathe and relax. Now use your imagination to picture yourself walking slowly along an earthen path. It's a pleasant path, and it's a beautiful day, and you feel relaxed and happy. You can feel the warmth of the sunlight on your skin and hear the birds chirping overhead. Soon, you come to a small, rusty iron gate. As you lift the latch, you are not sure what you will find beyond this gate. But you already sense that it leads to a special private place where you will feel inspired, protected, and comfortable. Push the gate open and allow yourself to enter. Now, as you look around, you notice that your garden is filled with your favorite things. Perhaps there are special plants, flowers, trees, animals, birds, water, or even the musical notes of moving water. Your garden may seem familiar, or it may be totally new to you. It may remind you of a favorite garden from childhood. Or it may look like a garden that you have cared for in the past. Perhaps a garden that you only visited once and fell in love with. Or it may be a garden that you've never ever seen before. Perhaps it's a garden of your future. As you are looking, become aware of how things might feel in this private place of yours. Explore this place with your sense of touch. Perhaps some things are soft and warm, others are smooth and cool. Notice what the air feels like. Is it cool or warm? Is there a breeze or is it still? Take the time to take another deep breath and feel the peace and serenity in your private place. Now become aware of the sounds, if any, that you hear in your garden. The sounds or the silence may be pleasing to your ear and comforting. Perhaps it is quiet in your garden, or maybe there are layers of sounds. Some of the sounds may be very soft, while others may be louder. Relax and listen for a while and see if you can identify the different sounds. If there are no sounds, can you enjoy the silence? Now take another deep breath and notice if you smell any fragrances that are present. If you do, notice which of them may be familiar, while noting others that may be unfamiliar. Are the fragrances soothing or invigorating? Now look around your garden and take everything in once more. What you see, what you hear, what you have touched, and what touched you. This is now imprinted in your memory. You are now ready to leave. You slowly walk back, feeling the earth under your feet, realizing that you have enjoyed your visit to the garden and feel relaxed and content. This good feeling will remain with you throughout the day. As you lift the latch and push the gate open, you return to the earthen path that led you here. As you make your way back up the path to the here and now, remember that you can use your imagination to return to your private garden at any time that you wish. Visit your garden anytime you would like to relax, be inspired, be comforted, or simply to enjoy its beauty. You are ready to resume your day. Stretch gently now and open your eyes, feeling refreshed and alert. We will now take 2 to 3 minutes to write down about your garden, what you saw and experienced in your meditation. we will now come back to the group. And if any of you would like to share any impressions or sensations that you had about your garden, you are welcome to put them in the chat room. Would be, or you can simply come back to this, since this was a short writing exercise, and write about it later when the workshop is over or at another time. So along this vein, one of the things that many people like to do in their space that they create for themselves in the garden is to write. So developed a number of writing prompts, but there's two that I will share with you today, and you will get a PDF copy of this presentation so you can come back to it. But those two questions are to get you going. Was when I was a kid, my favorite things to do in the garden were, and another question is, every garden needs pruning or weeding to promote space for new growth. So what is it in my life that I need to prune or weed out to create space for new growth? So now let's move on to how we create a garden sanctuary. So the first step is to step back and observe your garden. Like, what is there right now? And because it's easier to work within the existing framework of what you already have in your garden than to start inventing from scratch. So if this is, let's say, a small balcony or deck, is there some way I could use bamboo screening or a trellis with a beautiful solanum or potato vine climbing up it to separate like a little private space from the public space? So, most gardens, when people landscape, now we're talking about the bigger garden, have areas for, if you have children, there's areas for play, there's areas for cooking, there's areas for entertaining. But what we're talking about here is creating, and it doesn't have to be large, it can be cozy and intimate, a space for you. So it's easier to work within what you have, but how could you take that space, if it's a little area in the back of your garden, and make it a space that you want to go to, that you feel comfortable in, and that would inspire you to connect with yourself, whether you're silent, whether you write, whether you meditate, whether, by the way, this guided meditation I just did is one I created, but there are so many apps now that have guided meditation. A couple of my favorites are the Calm app, and another good one is 10% Happier. So, if guided meditation works better than sitting and meditating on your own, just go for what is easier for you. How else can you create this space? By making some kind of demarcation that marks your sacred space as separate from the public space in the garden, like the space when people come over where they hang out. You want your space to be a little tucked away, a little boundary that you've created, whether through plantings or other objects, like fencing, trellising. There's so many stones. There's so many ways to do this, and it's what inspires you. But what the objective here is that you're creating an area dedicated to quiet reflection. Again, you want your garden giving back to you so that you then, there's a giving and receiving in life. And when your garden is nourishing you and you are taking the time to enjoy it and to be fed by it, then that's like full circle. Then, it's going to work where you want to go out and do more gardening and exert and put more energy into your garden. But just like your garden changes constant, you are always changing. So it's really important with these spaces we create for ourselves to be flexible and give ourselves permission to change certain elements as your needs or desire changes, or even as the seasons change. Our gardens are changing and we are changing. So it's not set in stone. It's a fluid creation that you're going for. Here's a slide submitted by another master gardener when I asked him where he liked to reflect in his garden. And you can see that many people do it with words, like here's blessings. I think that's so beautiful on this trellis, and powerful symbols like this can imbue our spaces with a lot of individual meaning. Also important to ask yourself in defining this space, where are you happiest sitting in the garden? Where are the areas that you naturally gravitate towards? And where you like to be? And what do I like to look at? All of these, important. Here are some demarcated entrances. We talked about this. Here is an arbor entryway point leading into the garden with stepping stones. This master gardener created a simple little deck off her back kitchen door, and she happened to be inspired by the Buddha statue. So we just have a couple of very simple plantings here, some stones and statuary. And it's quite simple, but quite lovely and looks private and protective. And these are places where you go to regenerate. People that are experiencing stress, grief, they need healing, some kind of healing in their lives. These can be very beautiful, protective spaces to go to in the outdoors. Late John Andrews, another master gardener, created this space in the corner of his garden, and it's a simple bench or chair that he used for meditation with plantings around him that he liked. This is one by Cynthia Nixon. She loves color, and so she created this space in her Half Moon Bay garden with these beautiful basket chairs in this sort of eye-popping turquoise color, and with plants all around her. And it's sort of a little separate from the rest of her garden, but she loves to be in this corner of her garden. And this is the view she has. So who wouldn't want to be there, right? Sit back, relax, and enjoy the view. So how do you make the space personal? So you can do this by adding your favorite plants, herbs with scent, or favorite smells to add aromatherapy or healing elements to the space. So, herbs that like mint and tarragon and oregano, are all have a wonderful sort of spicy smell. There are pelargoniums, like scented pelargoniums that exude scent right around you, or you can simply pinch the leaf and crush it and hold it up to your nose, like the lemon. There's lemon pelargonium, rose scented pelargonium, chocolate mint. It just goes on and on. So it's something to look into and investigate further if you'd like to bring that aromatherapy element into your space. We talked about sounds in the guided meditation. So adding sounds by bringing in wind chimes or rustling plants like bamboo, or a water feature of running water can be a wonderful thing to have to listen to as you're sitting quietly. And you can create a garden niche or the simple garden altar for displaying meaningful objects to you. I mean, it can be anything from stones you've found on the beach to, Tibetan bells, to whatever you have collected that, could be rose quartz, different healing stones. It could be images. It could be a simple vase with flowers picked from your garden or herbs picked from your garden in it. That just the simplicity of the act of doing that and setting it up and having something simple and beautiful to look at is very calming. And there's other edible plants and herbs, just a few of them. The sages, many of those have saints. Calendula on the left, flowering sage, rose geranium. On the right, we have peppery nasturtium, which is wonderful. Just some of the possibilities. Let your mind just sort of be open. And that's the other thing about creating sacred space is have patience and give it time and be open and let things evolve in an organic way. Water features, we talked about that, how that can add quite an element of beauty and sound and clarity. Running water, it symbols sort of the clarity that many of us want in our lives today. So again, these symbolic influences. You can use mirrors and artwork in your garden, as demonstrated on a previous slide. We saw that the Create Your Dreams artwork. Here's one in the back of my garden. And again, mirrors act as reflection. So I took an old pedestal sink and I like to say upcycled it to a garden container and found this was an old window that I had framed with mirrors because I liked what it reflected. And this is part of the area in the back of my garden where I like to meditate and journal. And it could be just as simple as a bowl of water with no moving parts. That also, of course, helps to feed the insect and birds. And statuary in the garden is very individual to each of us. I've seen some gardens where, we have a statue of St. Francis, and other gardens where there's statue of Kuan Yin. There can be animal statues of turtles and that represent different things to you. And so this statue was actually taken at a pond on the right in Bali. And this one on the left is from my back garden. And Buddhists, many people like Buddhists because of the calming influence. It doesn't mean you are a Buddhist or need to follow Buddhism, but they are soothing and beautiful to many people. Different cash pose, different things that you've made. Like I happened to make this pot when I was doing a ceramics class. It could be something else that you made or fashioned. There's nothing like a handmade object in your garden, whether it's a handmade bench that you're sitting on, or a wicker basket, or a piece of ceramic sculpture. In this case, again, John Andrews submitted this to me. He made this stepping stone, and all of the glass and the stones in the stepping stone had meaning to him. And this marked the entryway to his simple bench that I showed earlier on a previous slide. Sacred gardens are also multicultural. Indonesia on the left, Greece on the right. In Santorini, wheat, this wall wheat hanging. Wheat symbolizes so many things, and you can get into the symbolic meaning of different plants. And wheat is very ancient. It symbolizes the harvest, nourishment, grains, the earth. Here's a mosaic pathway that someone created, winding through the town in a part of Greece. This was not Santorini. We talked about the Zen statues and stones. These are temple gardens in Kyoto, and the raked gravel, I believe it's pronounced kare sansu, or dry landscape, is used by monks as an aid in meditation. And also, when you go out to the Japanese tea garden, by the way, in San Francisco, you will see an area with raked gravel, which is the same concept. So as you look at public gardens too, it's stimulating to see, what concepts of sacred gardens have they brought forward, if any, in these public gardens. A bridge is also a very potent symbol, and some people have little wooden bridges in their garden. You may not have a water pond or lake or water feature to actually warrant a full-blown bridge, but they symbolize movement in our life from one place to another, sometimes from the old to the new. And these are more of the gratitude baskets that are used daily in Bali. Such a beautiful culture. This was a monastery garden in Meteora, Greece, up near where Mount Athos and all the monasteries are. Just quite simply beautiful. And back to home, it can be, this was a garden space I consulted on where she simply wanted a spot, a nook, a garden nook to relax, to write, and to pray. And I love the roses that sort of enshroud this space, that are spilling down and almost creating a semi-wall of sort to give her a private space. But back to our Bay Area gardens. So Spirit, Marin County in Woodacre, it's a little north of Fairfax, I guess, California. There's a very beautiful, if you want to see an example, garden space in a very big, beautiful, it's open to the public just to walk through their gardens. So this is a prayer wheel, and you can spin this wheel. And one of the concepts is in our lives is about, this one happens to be spin to wise effort, but there's also wise speech. There's 5 different wise concepts. And if you want to know more about that, you could investigate that. But it's about, and this is what I'm talking about, this concept in the garden about the giving and the receiving. Are we using wise effort in our garden? Are we using affection wisely? I think the right attention, there's wise attention, wise speech, wise effort. It has to do with the balance that of balance of energies in these primary areas of our life. And I really believe it applies to our gardens. It's always good to work in some California natives around your space. This is one of my favorites, rosy or red buckwheat. Silver bush lupine attracts the pollinators. So love bringing insects, wildlife into our garden. So as you sit and reflect, you have something to look at. And this is also so good for the environment that you're attracting pollinators. And native plants also expand our pollinator palette. So all of this is quite beautiful and will attract. I have another workshop I do called Keep Your Garden Humming. And it's what plants to plant. It's to attract pollinators to your garden. And so here's a bee on the Spanish lavender on the right. Loves that Spanish lavender. Here's a hummingbird in the garden. These are so wonderful to look at. I know I have hot lip salvia planted outside, and I just thoroughly enjoy watching the hummers go from flower to flower. They love that plant. Another one is Kufia zillionaire that they love. And it's so splendid to have these creatures and critters coming to our garden. Here's a swallowtail butterfly. And this is one I actually captured on a pot in my garden, this tree frog, which I thought was pretty cool. And of course, our own pets and animals. This happens to be mine, Silas, and he likes the nasturtium. So you may not necessarily always want your pet in a space when you're meditating, but for some people, depending on the personality and the peppiness of your pet, some people find that comforting. So again, very individual, but it's always fun to see our own cats, dogs, critters in the garden. And finally, I thought this was very simple, and it expresses really the concept of what we're going for here in creating sacred space. Is a place where we can express gratitude and feel such a sense of well-being, that we're lucky, fortunate enough to have this garden, have this space, and perhaps even have the time to just sit quietly. And that's a major accomplishment for most people, to just even allow themselves, whether it's 5 minutes of quiet, to go sit and enjoy the garden rather than working in the garden. So the desired outcome is to create a space that makes you feel good and where you want to be. It's not to, you are doing this for yourself, and it's actually not a selfish act, but a selfless act, because if you're taking care, this is a form of self-care. If you're taking care of yourself, then you can take better care of others. So here's my contact information. And if you want to see an example of my public work, you could visit the Noe Valley Town Square, which is located right on our main drag in San Francisco at 3861 24th Street, San Francisco. And my email address is here. These are some of the references that I used in preparation for this presentation. And I first developed this 4 years ago, but I'm always, just like I said with your sacred space, it's flexible and I'm always adding to it and tweaking it and changing it a bit. But there's some very good references here if you want to delve even deeper, take a deep dive into this. And one of my favorite nurseries here in San Francisco for Bay Area natives and drought tolerant is Bay Area natives. I've also used photos here on this slide from Las Politas Nursery, which is not near here. And I hope you find these references helpful. Today, I wanted to bring this in on time around 2 o'clock, and I think I'm doing pretty well. But I wanted to thank the San Mateo Arboretum for hosting this. It's been a wonderful opportunity to share my passion with some of you. And last, I will leave the screen up for a bit because many people have questions, and what the Master Gardeners, has a helpline, and you could ask a master gardener. And this is, by the way, Master Gardeners are located in 58 counties of California. And as Virginia was saying, I represent the San Francisco San Mateo chapter. But to contact our helpline, the phone number is up here, the email address is here, and also the available times where you can visit in person if you have a plant specimen you want to bring in. There are 3 different locations at Elkus Ranch and the Botanical Garden Library in San Francisco, and the Veterans Memorial Senior Center in Redwood City. And if you do call with a question or you email with a question, it's always best to submit photos, because many people are calling because they have a plant that doesn't do well, or they think it might have insects or it needs help. So the more photos that you can include that demonstrate or illustrate that problem, the better. And you can also follow us on social media. So that today concludes my presentation, and we're open for, I believe we're open, Virginia, for questions and answers at this point.
Correct. So we have one question. It's a practical question. When you place artwork or on an entry gate in the garden, do you add any kind of sealant to the artwork to prevent rust? I live near the coast and have daily fog in my garden.
Okay, so that's a good question, and it depends on what the artwork is. Okay, so like the mirror that I showed was an exterior it was actually a mirror that came from a house, a window that came from a house. And so that requires, I just put it out there as is, and it's been out in my garden for the past 15 years. So no, but if you're putting something like, for instance, sculpture, no. It should be for outdoors, of course. That would require preparation. But if you were to put a painting out in the garden, it would only be very short term, and you would want to spray that painting, protect it with some sort of acrylic sealer. I know at the Noe Valley Garden Tour, which I'm involved in every year, I'm on the committee, we feature a day of art in the garden. And for one day, if you're, and it's all different kinds of art, from pottery to paintings, to sculpture. The paintings are usually, we hang them in a shady area where the sun's not beating directly on them. And it's fine for a day. They go up the night before the show and they come down the next day. So paintings would be the thing I would be very protective of. But otherwise, you can go to a lot of different nurseries and you'll see things already displayed in the garden, like, various sculptures and stones and those kinds of things you don't have to be concerned about. And let me know if that answers your question or if you have an additional tag-on question to that.
In the meantime, let's move to the next question, which is, the statue in your garden is of Kuan Yin.
Yes.
Who is that?
Oh, so Kuan Yin is in Tibetan Buddhist, she's known as the goddess of compassion. And so I happen to, as I said, it's my personal connection. But to learn more about Kuan Yin, you could Google her. It's spelled Q-U-A-N, separate word, Y-I-N, Kuan Yin. And you can learn the history of her, but because of the kindness and compassion element of what she represents, that's why I wanted her specifically in my garden. And she's been here now for 22 years. So that one, as I said, to be flexible, but there's some things that you're just going to love and connect with in your sacred space, and you may never want to move. And that's perfectly okay too.
Thank you. The next question is, I have a lot of wildlife in my area. If I add a water feature, I worry I might invite the wrong animals. So it's not quite a question, but anyone with a perception about that.
Yes. Well, especially if you're concerned about, I don't know what kind of wildlife are you talking. It could be deer, it could be coyote, it could be bobcats, and something that you don't want in your garden. It's probably better than, like, all of these are suggestions. Let me sort of back up a step. They're all suggestions. So if that is a concern, then I would not add a wildlife feature. These are all optional, like what works for your environment and what you respond to in your space. So, perhaps there's, I did show the simple bowl of water, and perhaps one workaround could be that when you do go to your space, You could bring a simple bowl of water, you put some stones on it if you want to have that water element around you, and then remove it, something absolutely very light and portable, and remove it, when you are finished meditating. I'm trying to think of another creative way in which unless you had something like a sculpture, an outdoor sculpture of some time that represented water or waves or a river that you could hang on a fence, um, just sort of like use your creativity if you want that element there all the time. But that's the best advice I could give you. If I was concerned about that, I would not have a standing water feature.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Just want to make sure that everyone has gotten their questions in. There are some very nice comments that all of you can read, I'm sure, about this. So if we are at the end of our presentation, I want to thank you, Arete, for a wonderful, fascinating, inspiring presentation. And also I appreciate the imaginative garden, because some of us have very small gardens, so finding a quiet place may not work. For all the participants, you will receive a link in the next few days to a recording of the presentation and an evaluation form. And we really appreciate your feedback on what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, whatever could be improved. And if there's any unanswered questions, they can be addressed at that time. So I just want to mention as our last note that we do have monthly programs at the San Mateo Arboretum Center. And our next one for September is Houseplant Basics. It's done by the UC Master Gardeners again. And I just wanted to mention that the garden with the turquoise chairs was Cynthia Nations, and Cynthia is involved in the next houseplant program. So what they'll be talking about is exposure to green plants promotes overall well-being, and we'll learn the benefits of houseplants, how to choose them, how to take care of them, and go to our website, sanmatoarboretum.org, and you can get details and also register. So Arete, thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful presentation, very unique. And we hope to have you in our future again. And thanks to Kevin, our tech person, for getting this to all go in one smooth operation. So thank you. That's the end of our program, and we appreciate all of you who have participated.